it's really important to go into that interview as a candidate thinking about, okay, who is this family? Does my personality fit with them? Are my skills what they're looking for? Are what they want the same things as what I want in my career, or, my time in their kitchen, or whatever it might be? Those similarities are extremely important.
This episode is brought to you by FultonFishMarket.com, the most trusted name in seafood. FultonFishMarket.com is the e-commerce provider for New York's iconic Fulton Fish Market, the largest seafood market in the Western Hemisphere, trusted by top chefs for over 200 years. Fulton Fish Market provides a range of world-class seafood options. FultonFishMarket.com can help you serve a wide range of customers, whether you serve high-profile individuals or just strive for culinary excellence. They deliver directly to your doorstep in all 48 contiguous states, providing a comprehensive selection of the finest seafood, from wild fish to caviar and shellfish. When it comes to seafood, FultonFishMarket.com is our go-to destination and the name we trust. Let's celebrate those who support us and dive into this episode of the Private Chef podcast with a taste of excellence and freshness. Visit www.fultonfishmarket.com to get 15% off your first order. Use code PrivateChef at checkout. Welcome to the Private Chef podcast, serving the 1%. I'm your host, Hennche. And on our show, we speak to the best chefs, how they honed in on their skills to excel in the industry, and what it takes to work as a private chef for some of the most exclusive clients in the world. Welcome back to the Private Chef podcast. I'm your host, Hennche. In this episode, I'm excited to welcome Brittany Dolin, the co-founder of Pocketbook Agency. Brittany's journey as a personal and executive assistant to high-profile families inspired her to create a recruiting firm that is fostering lasting connections, with a keen understanding of leaders and ultra-high-net-worth families. Specializing in the family office sector, Brittany collaborates with prominent families nationwide, recognized as a recruiting expert in publications like the Financial Times and Forbes. Brittany also dedicates time to mentoring LA youth through Heart of Los Angeles, guiding college students who are in search of their dream career path. Brittany, thank you so much for making the time. And we already had a pretty good conversation off the record, so I'm really looking forward to exploring this.
Thank you, Hannes. I appreciate you having me on, and I'm excited to talk with you.
So how did you initially slip into, the private service world, becoming an assistant to somebody, and where did the passion for it come from?
Yeah, I started as an assistant in my early 20s, and I was a personal assistant for an ultra high net worth family here in Los Angeles. And that's actually how I met my co-founder of Pocketbook Agency. She was also an assistant on the family's team. And the two of us worked together across everything for this family. So we were always together, always communicating with contacts and their network. And they were within entertainment and philanthropy. So we, between those two industries, had such a big network of contacts that we were talking to all the time. And, very long story short, we ended up helping other assistants find jobs on the side, because we would have our contacts come to us and say, how do we clone you? Or how do we find another version of you for our team? And we knew what we were doing because we had all the right connections. We knew all the assistants within the entertainment industry and within Los Angeles. And so we realized after, 6 months, a year, I think, of doing this on the side, making a few placements, we realized, why are we not turning this into a company? There's obviously a demand here. We have the network. And so Nicole, my co-founder, and myself, we started building Pocketbook, and we spent a few years still working in our full-time jobs as assistants, building Pocketbook on the weekends, at night, whenever we had a free chance, because, as most assistants know, that job is incredibly demanding. So we didn't have a lot of spare time, but we loved it. And, in 2014, Pocketbook was born.
So how long did it take you to transition till it actually made sense for you to leave your job? And then I guess I want to know what your boss said, because both of you worked for the same family.
We did. So we spent, I would say, about maybe 2 years kind of under the radar, building Pocketbook. It's, building a company is not easy. So we really took our time. We developed our network. When we were thinking about what we wanted Pocketbook to be, we didn't want it to be another recruiting firm. there's a ton of great ones out there, by the way, but we wanted to be different because obviously that would define our successes. How are we going to be different than all the other firms? So we wanted to really revolutionize the industry. And so through that development of, about 2 years behind the scenes developing Pocketbook, we really thought about all the ways we could modernize it. And about 2 years in, when we went to give notice to our employers, they were very surprised, of course, because we were dedicating our full-time lives. We were not working on Pocketbook during office hours. So we were dedicating our full time to our employers. And we came to them and we were, of course, very honest because we wanted their support. They were always so supportive of us and great mentors and so helpful. And of course, they were surprised. I remember the conversation, and I actually think it's helpful for us today because so many assistants, when they do need to give notice, this memory comes back to me of how did I give notice and what did I say to my employer? And basically told them, we're starting a company. We have built such a great network and we feel called. We feel a need to do this and we would really love your support. It would mean the world to us. And they were so supportive. They were, of course, surprised and needed help replacing us, which they so, willingly gave us those roles to refill, which was wonderful. And we filled them and they're actually still there. They still work with our previous employers. It's been probably 8 years since we placed one person.
Amazing.
So yeah, so it's great. And they were very supportive, but giving that notice was scary, of course, jumping into a new career essentially and not knowing what was going to happen. It's always a big risk.
I find this so cool that they're still there. So not only did they give you, the opportunity to kind of prove yourself to them, but also you found a match that lasted for already 8 years. I think that's so powerful. Doesn't that feel amazing?
And that's why we do what we do. I mean, we have many other clients that we helped fill roles for early on. We've been in business for 9 years now. And when we have quite a few clients that we call and their employees are still there. I actually just talked yesterday to one of our chiefs of staff that we placed. Well, at the time he was an executive assistant and he's been promoted since, but we placed for an ultra high net worth music exec. And we spoke to him yesterday and he's like, I'm still here. And that's why we do what we do. It really is for us about matchmaking and genuine connections.
So let's explore that notice conversation because I think this is a thing. Even good working relationships occasionally have to come to an end. Maybe we want to evolve. Maybe there's something else that has to happen in our life that fulfills us more, or there's personal things. And I think it's a very tough conversation that isn't always easy for us. And I've seen some really good people that come to my mind who had good relationships with the families, not doing this one crucial part great, and it kind of stains the relationship. So what would you consider, or maybe how did you go about it? What's best practice in giving notice on what might be a really good relationship, and how, like, one of the things that I always did in the US, which my coworkers were like, why are you giving like 2-3 months notice? And I'm like, because I think that's how long it takes to find somebody great to fill the position. Like I was never accustomed, because I come from Europe. It was normal for me to give very long notice anyway. I was never accustomed to that 2-week notice period. Yeah.
And I would say in the US, in my experience, and I would say many employers would say the same, 2 weeks is standard. It's what is considered courteous to give 2 weeks, because most employment is at will. So you really don't even have to give 2 weeks, but most people do. I oftentimes, because of the types of roles that we work on and the level at which we work at, whenever someone gives notice, we will often see them ask their new employer through us if they can give a month, or if they can give 2 months, because they want their current employer to feel that they're not going to leave them high and dry. They're going to help them find a great replacement. And I think it's very courteous as long as the timeline works out. I've also seen the other side of it where someone gives notice and they say, I'll be here for a month or two to help you refill the role. And the employer will say, it's okay, you can leave today. And that's unfortunate when that happens, because especially when you've built a long relationship and you've worked with somebody for years, you want to maintain that. And so I think going back to your first part of the question, there is a really courteous way to give notice and to keep that relationship, because not only, even if as a job seeker, you maybe loved the job or you didn't love the job, it doesn't really matter. What matters is keeping that relationship and never burning bridges, because ultimately that person could be a reference for you for future jobs as well. So you really want to try and keep that relationship great. It's very important, because I can't tell you how many times we check references as an agency, and we've had, potential candidates tell us, unfortunately, you can't reach out to this person because, it didn't end well. And it does happen. Sometimes you can't avoid it, really. You never really know how somebody's going to react when you say you're leaving them. More often than not, people are willing to keep the relationship and give a good reference, but it can be challenging in those instances.
Yeah. Actually, this in itself is an interesting topic. So let's say you're calling in for a reference, and it's not raving reviews. It's more like, in between the lines. How do you take that? Let's say you only, maybe you can only get one reference on the line. How do you handle that? Maybe you think that the candidate is strong. The first impression was really good. You interviewed them, they're good. The resume looks good. But then you have that conversation on the phone with a reference, and it's like somewhat in between the lines. You're not too sure about it. How does that impact the process of taking somebody through an interview process?
Yeah, I'm actually really glad you asked me this question. I had a conversation with one of our clients this morning about this exact thing. So references to me and to any agency are the most important part of the process, because references are the point where we really find out how you performed in your past roles and if you're a great candidate for this new role. And we can interview somebody and think that they're fantastic. The potential employer can interview them and think that they're incredible and perfect for the job. But once we get to reference checks, which typically it can happen at various stages in the interview process, but the most typical is right before an offer is made, we'll check references. And we always tell our clients who are the employers, we always tell them, this is when we're really going to find out if everything that we've seen is true. Because we know there's so many amazing job seekers that we work with, so many amazing assistants, chefs, all kinds of roles. And we want them to have great references, because if we think they're great, all we want is that reassurance, right? Because we would hope that that's the case. Most of the time it is, which is the good news. And if we do get a reference that we think is iffy, what we will do always in this case is we'll dig a little deeper and we'll ask the reference. If we feel like there's something off, we will always ask the reference, is there something that maybe happened, or is there more information you can tell us about this person's skill set, or any incidences that have happened, or any red flags for you? We really try to ask the extra question to dig a little bit deeper and see what they'll tell us. Now, truthfully, sometimes we don't always get the full story, but if we do feel there's any kind of a red flag or hesitation, we will always tell the potential employer, of course, that this is the reference we got. We're not sure. Sometimes we have to say we're not sure exactly if we don't get the exact reasoning or an exact answer. We're just always very honest about it. And we leave it to them. We say, if you want to have a conversation with them, we can set that up. If you want to talk to the candidate about it, that's also an option, because sometimes it can be maybe something happened with a candidate and it's not even necessarily a bad thing. It just maybe comes across differently in a reference. So we just always dig a little deeper. We ask the candidate about it. And if we do get a genuinely bad reference, we're always honest with our potential employers and tell them, listen, we got these good references, but we also got this reference that wasn't so great. So let's talk about it. And sometimes what will happen is they'll go back to the candidate and we'll have a conversation with them and say, we didn't get a great reference from this person. Can you give us more insight on maybe why it wasn't great? And sometimes it's recoverable and sometimes it's not. But we're always just very open-ended and honest communicators when it comes to this, because again, this is the most important part of the process.
So what would you say are the biggest red flags when families say, okay, this is not longer a considered candidate for me?
I would say, well, one question that we always ask in reference checks are, is there anything that we should know that is a negative, or anything that's happened with this candidate that would keep you from hiring them again? Because that's an honest way to ask. And the most common thing we've gotten is, maybe this person wasn't as excited about the job or didn't deliver quite what they thought they were going to deliver. Or, let's talk about chefs. Maybe the food during the trial was fantastic, and then maybe during the actual, work in their first month wasn't as impressive. Or maybe, they thought they were going to keep the kitchen cleaner than they did. So there's always these little instances that sometimes are really just a red flag for that family and can be something we discuss with the candidate and resolve. And sometimes it's not. So every situation is really unique.
Yeah, I think that's also something I found from a candidate perspective, that families are incredibly unique and they have their own kind of thing going on in their house, and some are super anal about where things are in the fridge, to a degree where the principal themselves will move it in the fridge and reorganize it if the staff hasn't done it already.
Yes.
And then there's other people who don't even walk into the kitchen, and there's households, where it's just like whichever way the chef wants it. And so that it's like, and that's one of the things I keep telling chefs that ask me, like, should they go about this? And I'm like, the best thing is to actually explore this a little bit and take your time, and also interview the families and see where you think there's natural alignment between who you are as a person and the food you love to cook and the skill set you have, and where that kind of clicks by default, rather than trying to force it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think during an interview process, the interview is going both ways, right? As someone who's looking for a job, you might go into the interview saying, I really want to make sure I impress this person so that they hire me. But the truth of the matter is, yes, of course you want to perform your best in the interview, but you're also interviewing the family or the individual that you're going to be working for, because you want to make sure, and we emphasize this because it's part of, I think, what makes us different, and part of our process is we want both sides to be 100% excited and interested and know that it's the right fit before we proceed. So it's really important to go into that interview as a candidate thinking about, okay, who is this family? Does my personality fit with them? Are my skills what they're looking for? Are what they want the same things as what I want in my career, or, my time in their kitchen, or whatever it might be? Those similarities are extremely important.
One thing that always kind of was like cherry on a Sunday for me is when the family had an impact in the world that I appreciated as a person, as a human on this planet, where I felt like they're doing something great, they're doing something good, and that always accelerated me, because I felt like I'm supporting this human being and the family in their journey to do more good in this world, and I'm a stone in that change, so to say.
Yeah, I see that all the time. I see more and more actually and I would even say with younger candidates or people that are less experienced moving into these roles, the younger generation is much more concerned about how the company or the individual is giving back to, or making a positive impact in the world, and what their company is doing or what they're doing as an individual with philanthropy or whatever it might be. More and more I've seen over the years that has become a bigger priority than it was even 5 years ago.
Do you think that's a good thing, a positive thing for the industry? Or do you think we should be more professional and not care for that?
I don't think it's a negative by any means. I think if, at the end of the day, if it's something that's important to you, then that should be something that you're thinking about during your interview process. It's not important to everybody. Some people really just genuinely care that they can go in and do the job and that's what they're doing. And that's great too. But some people are looking beyond just what they're doing in their job. And they're really looking at how is it impactful in the bigger picture of things in the world? And how am I giving back? Or how is this person's life or company a reflection of me at the end of the day? And I think that's great. I think it's wonderful.
Yeah. You did mention a couple of times that Pocketbook, you felt like when you first founded it, when you started it, that you can do something different and kind of change the industry. Where would you say your core differences lie?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think when we started Pocketbook, I know I mentioned this, that we really set out to modernize this as much as we could, because there are many great firms that had been around for many years, and that's all well and good. But when we were working with agencies as assistants ourselves, there were certain things that we thought we could probably revolutionize this and make it just a little bit more of a modern approach. And I think that goes back to what we've developed over the last 9 years and what we call our smarter staffing technique. And, not to give away all of our secret sauce, but it's a method that we developed early on. When we first started Pocketbook, Nicole and I developed this together, and we've continued to perfect it. I think a good company will always continue perfecting their systems as the years go on. And, the whole idea of this technique is really that we're looking beyond skill set. Skill set is obviously incredibly important, and the first thing we look at when we look at someone's resume and if they're a fit for a role. But, typically the roles that we work on, whether it's a chef or it's a personal assistant, you in that role are working so closely with your principal, whether you're in their home, you're in their space, you're in their finances, all of their personal information ultimately. So we are focusing not only just on the hard skills and the experience, but we're also focusing on soft skills. We're focusing on what really makes this person tick as an individual. What is their personality like? How are they going to mesh well with our clients? I think it's also us really comprehensively understanding our clients' needs and the nuances of what their day-to-day is like. When we're matchmaking, that's what we're doing. We're matchmaking. We're not just filling a role. We're not, sending a client 20 resumes and hoping for the best. It's a really, really curated approach through different screenings and background checks and all different sorts of things like that. But I think that's really ultimately what sets us apart is our systems and what we've developed and how we continue to perfect it as we work with our clients and job seekers.
Do you use personality tests or DISC test?
So we can. It's not an initial part of our process that we do automatically, but we do get that request often, and we're happy to do it. We think it's wonderful when personality tests are added. We don't always think it's entirely necessary for the process, which is why we don't automatically do it, but we're happy to do it always.
That's something that I had to do for one family. And then I was very curious. I'm like, okay, because to me, it wasn't that obvious what the results were. And then I was wondering what that means to them,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we work with quite a few families consistently who use personality tests, and everybody uses different tests, but the DISC test is very common. It's one of the more common ones. And I always wonder that too, because they're clearly looking for very specific traits, and sometimes I think it works to their benefit because they really know what they want. And sometimes I think it works against it, honestly, because a personality test is great and can tell you a lot about somebody. But I honestly think having a one-on-one conversation and interviewing them is sometimes almost more effective in just figuring out how you mesh with them and who they are. So I have mixed feelings on personality tests. I like them as an addition, but I don't love them when we're using it to rule somebody out before an interview.
So what was it like for you to build Pocketbook so now you've decided to leave the family and you're having your first kind of placements, things are going well, but at the end of the day, you're building a business and that's a different skill set, it's a different career, as you said earlier. So What were some of the early challenges that you faced?
Well, starting a business is never easy, and anyone who's even tried knows that challenge. But I would say, the early days of Pocketbook when we first launched were quite interesting. I mean, I would say they were very, very busy. Nicole and I were wearing all the hats. We didn't have any employees. It was just the two of us. We were the CEOs. We were, HR officers. We were recruiters. We were managing finances. And it was a learning process for sure. Nicole and I both were first-time business owners. We were both, I was in my 20s. Nicole was in her 30s when we started Pocketbook. So we were first-time business owners, and there was a lot of learning involved, but those first few years really fast-tracked us to understand how to run a company and how to be a CEO and how to have a team. And I think we're now a team of 12. We've, slowly grown over the years. We've hired as we've had the demand from our clients. And, I think now that we work on between 80 and 100 jobs at, one time, our team is very busy, and we're so thankful for that. We love the people that we work with. And I think finding our place in a very competitive market was, of course, tough. But I do think, given our network and given just our really, really excellent thought process and how we put together our processes and our standards for what we were looking for, we just built over the years a really, really solid company and a really great place to work. And I think as we start to build our team, when the first 3 years of having Pocketbook, we started to build the team. Our team is what makes us. I mean, our team is so passionate about what they do. And Nicole and I are very, very passionate as well. And I think our leadership shines through in the type of work that we do for our employers and how we do our day-to-day work with our team. Everybody's so passionate about matchmaking, and that really shines through, I think, in our results.
Sorry for the interruption, but we gotta share the news with you. Nothing fishy from FultonFishMarket.com. They're delivering world-class seafood from New York City's legendary Fulton Fish Market straight to your door. Their fishmongers have helped countless chefs get what they need when they need it for over 200 years. Trusting FultonFishMarket.com means their experts work tirelessly to make your day run smoothly. Let your cooking skills shine and elevate your dishes with amazing seafood from FultonFishMarket.com. I love this. And I feel like I'm seeing more of that where leaders that care to build great teams succeed, and it seems that even in the recruitment and, kind of agency world, the kind of the tonality, the overall sentiment has changed that, you can care for the people that work with you, you can care for the people that you're placing in jobs, and you can have great results doing it. And I think some of the little bit more old school agencies that I dealt with in the early stage of my career, they weren't like that at all. It was like you said earlier, you 20 resumes, here you go, it's like the noodle that sticks on the wall. And then one candidate gets placed, great, maybe they get flipped in 6 months or not. And I feel like that has greatly changed thanks to leaders like you and teams that you build.
Thank you. I really do think that when we set out to start Pocketbook, it came from a place of genuine need. It wasn't just a thought of, oh, we have a network and we've been doing this, let's start a company and keep doing it. It was, of course, we had the network and we were placing people, and that was really exciting for us, but it made us think on a deeper level of how can we change this and how can we actually impact the industry and be helping both the job seeker and the employer find these genuine connections that are going to last a very long time. That was the entire thought process.
Yeah. And I mean, to me, hearing the other day, I was interviewing Veronica Icon, and she's been with the same family for nearly 20 years. And I love to hear that stuff. I love to hear when people have like 10 plus years with the family and they still feel excited to work there and about their relationship. And I think that the way you describe it, that you really have like an additional sense to find those matches, like that true matchmaking, But on the other end, there's also families who consistently flip through candidates.
Yes.
And how do you as an agent deal with those kind of red flag families? I mean, we all know they exist, and they kind of have a reputation, and we keep seeing similar ads with different agencies, So how do you deal with them as an agent?
Yes. That is a great question. We do see that, and I think in any industry, there's always some kind of similar situation, right? Where we want to help the family. And of course, nothing would make us happier if we know that they have a reputation of hiring and then letting people go within 6 months. Nothing would make us happier than placing someone and having them last even a year. That would be wonderful. But I think what we do is we're just very honest with the candidates before they would interview for a job. And we tell them that, this is a great family. Here's why they're wonderful. They, maybe the job itself is attractive and the pay is attractive and the benefits are attractive and that's all great. But we're still very honest, and tell them we've seen, not personally, or maybe it has been personally through our own agency, that this client will hire. And then unfortunately, sometimes it seems that they go through candidates fairly quickly for this role. And we'd love to see how we can change that, because I think there's always a glimmer of hope with this type of client. And I think a lot of agencies think about these types of clients that way, that we really just want to help them and we want to find somebody that's going to stick in the job. And we've actually had some clients that had a reputation for having high turnover. We've actually found them people that have lasted a pretty long time. And we were very honest with the candidates about it, always going into an interview, because we would never be dishonest about that. And we've seen them last longer than the typical candidate does in that role. And that, I think, is a victory in and of itself. But we're just always honest about it. I think that honesty is the best approach. If you know something, even if it's not even about high turnover, if it's just about a reputation in general or something that we know is an actual fact, we always disclose what we can. We never want to put a family, in a category of their roles being unfillable just because they have high turnover. Sometimes there's just little tweaks that need to be made that actually really fix the problems. And we try to dig into that when we can. But that's how I would approach it.
Did you ever feel the need to actually stop working with the family? Because there's families who legitimately mistreat stuff. And have you ever felt the need to be like, I'm sorry, we just can't place any of our people with you because we just want them to be treated better?
So it's a little bit tricky, because a lot of times candidates sign an NDA when they go into a role. So there's very little they can tell us. But if something major happens and, we are told and we're allowed to have this information, we will be very honest with the client always. And we will tell them that if, we know that this happened and we really want to help you find the right person, but we can't work together if we keep having people interview and keep getting the same feedback. Then we know that, maybe something is going on. Or if, someone isn't under an NDA and they share something with us, and then we go back and we talk to the client about it. We're just very honest. We want to help people find the right team members, and we want to help people find great jobs, but we never want to put somebody in a job that we know is terrible or unsafe. And we're always very honest with the client. We want to help you find the right person for this role, but maybe even it's public knowledge. We saw this in the news that this happened, and we don't feel comfortable. We're just honest, truly. And I would hope that there's respect from the employer to us in regards to that, because all we want to do is be helpful, but we're not going to ever jeopardize putting somebody in a bad job or somewhere that's unsafe.
Yeah, I think that should be general attitude as agent, that especially if it's known that something might be unsafe. That's a big red flag. Yeah,
exactly.
So what was it like for you initially when you started as an assistant to somebody that is on that level of wealth? One, to organize their life and kind of assist them in their day-to-day and organize it for them, and then two, also being exposed to a world that's so vastly different than from what 99.9.9% percent of the world even know. Like that, you know, we're truly working for a very, very specific kind of client, and most people can't even imagine the kind of lifestyle they have and the complexity that comes with this.
Yeah.
What was that like for you to get into that world and wrap your head around somebody else's life?
Yeah. I think in the beginning, anybody who goes into a role where you are working for somebody who's ultra high net worth and you are newer in the industry or newer as an assistant or a chef or whatever your role is with them, there's always a little bit of shell shock where you step back and say, wow, this is a very different lifestyle than I've ever seen, or I'm, of course, you know, different from my own or whatever it might be. But I honestly, I can personally say when I was in the role, you kind of get used to it, because just like they get used to their lifestyle, probably at that level, they don't even know, you know, people who are ultra high net worth and have private jets and security and, you know, 20 staff and multiple homes, that's their norm. So I think someone working in their world, you almost become a little desensitized to it, and it becomes your norm as well. And I can say that that's the experience that I had. I loved working on all the projects and all, you know, as an assistant, managing multiple homes and staff and projects and interior design projects was always fun. And, you know, just keeping them organized, making sure that their private jet was there when they wanted it to be there, making sure that, you know, the chef was going to be there to cook for their 30-person dinner party on a Friday night. Just little fun things that it's very different, but it's very fun. And I think if you embrace that as an assistant or a chef or whatever your role is in the household, it's very exciting to step into that world and really not only see what, you know, that 1% lives in, but also just to experience it and be helpful and keep the wheels turning on everything. It's really fun. And I think even now with Pocketbook, those are still our clients. We work with, you know, the 1% of the world and the ultra high net worth individuals. And we've truly seen all sorts of different lifestyles and, you know, staff and homes and planes and all kinds of interesting things that are fascinating to, you know, anyone who's not part of that world. But truthfully, to us, we're so used to it at this point that it's not my personal lifestyle, but I'm used to it. I'm used to being a part of it. And it's almost second nature when I hear that, you know, you'll be working with the flight attendant and you'll be working with the chef and you'll be traveling to their Aspen home or their Miami home. And it's very, very normal at this point, but it's an interesting life. And I think it's really fun. I love working with our clients because it's interesting.
Yeah. I personally, for example, I have a preference, like, for example, there's artists, there's entertainers, you know, there is CEOs of tech companies, there is fund managers, money managers. So I personally have a preference as to where I like to apply my skills in that. Do you feel like there is a certain kind of family or clients that are more challenging in respect? Like, I'll give you an example. I was speaking to a chef who was the personal chef of a very, very well-known artist, singer. And you know, they had a very late-night lifestyle, very all over the place, very spontaneous. You know, it was very challenging for the chef. And do you feel like there is a certain pattern that you see with a certain kind of clients where you feel like they might be more challenging than others, or?
Well, yes, absolutely, because everybody's lifestyles are so different. And I would say the biggest challenge is always with music artists, because oftentimes they're on tour or they have concerts, or oftentimes we'll see that people like to go in the studio. If they're a recording artist, maybe they go in the studio at odd morning hours because that's when they're in their creative zone, and their assistant will have to be on that schedule as well. So those tend to be not even more challenging, I wouldn't say, because people are still very interested and do it, and they've done it for other music artists. But it's an interesting lifestyle to see when, you know, people work on opposite hours, and sometimes maybe their creative zone is 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. And then they're sleeping from 6 a.m. to 2 p.m. and then they're starting their day later and their assistant has to be on that schedule. So that I think is the most fascinating, is really the entertainment industry. Or when we're working with actors and maybe their assistant's traveling with them to be on set and maybe they're shooting late at night, or, you know, they're even if they're not traveling with them, but maybe their principal's international for something, whether it's an actor or an artist or even just an ultra high net worth family or a CEO, whatever it might be, you're on their schedule. So if they're in China and you're working in LA, you know you're going to be awake on their time, because if something pops up that you're going to have to change a flight or cancel or move a meeting, whatever it might be, you're on their time. So it's very interesting. And I think it comes with the territory of being an assistant. You have to be able to be willing to not necessarily always be on your own time and maybe not necessarily have your weekends off. So something to think about. And same with a chef, because you might be traveling with your principal. I've seen that too, where maybe you're on call and tomorrow you're going to Europe for 3 weeks and you just found out. It happened. I see it all the time.
Yeah, happened to me. So let's explore kind of the territory of an assistant a little bit, because I think it's like a linchpin in the whole ecosystem. You know, so much revolves around the assistant. What would you say? Like you did mention, for example, that if you're in LA and they're in China, you have to be available around those crucial minutes. Like, okay, let's say there's departure, there are flights, and how do you deal with that, but you still have your own life? Is it something where, you know, you can do it in your 20s and you'll do it maybe for a decade, and then the family needs a new personal assistant because, you know, it just doesn't really work with having a family, and you eventually people would like to have their own family? Or is it something where families also eventually start like, okay, we would like to keep this assistant, so we need to either hire another younger assistant that can cover the odd ends of the jobs? But how do you bring longevity into this crucial position, but at the same time have the assistant be available as much as you need them?
Yeah, I think it depends on the role and what the demand is always, because some roles are obviously more demanding than others, and there might be travel and nights and weekends, and it all depends on that workload, right? But I think I typically see when we see longevity in roles, sometimes it is the assistant that's working with a music artist that's traveling the world, and they've been in the role for, 5 to 10 years, and they've changed their lifestyle as this artist has changed their lifestyle, and they're kind of just on their schedule. And I think if you ask any assistant that's in that lifestyle, they would tell you that you just make it work. You just are on their schedule, you're on their time. And I do see people burn out, of course, because it's exhausting. It can be exhausting when you're working in that role and you're constantly on and there's no break. I've definitely seen people burn out. But I have also seen where employers will have their assistant maybe in a similar type of role as an artist or a musician, and they're traveling a lot and they're, on the road, and their assistants with them. After a certain amount of time, I've seen quite a few people bring on a second assistant, not necessarily someone younger, but somebody who just can also add and help, because they realize that maybe their other assistant isn't necessarily burned out. That's not the right term, but just could use support. And I actually like seeing that, because it just shows that they understand that, one person can't always do it all. And sometimes their lifestyle really does need more than one person. And I think that we see that sometimes, but I do think that these jobs, certain jobs, do have a lifespan, because just like an artist who's touring, they're not going to tour for 10 years straight. You know what I mean? It's the same thing with an assistant. You can't work at that rate and not have a break or not burn out. So I think there is definitely a lifespan for those types of roles. I do see some candidates who have been doing it forever and love it, and that's their life. And they've made it work. They balance their family. They balance their personal time. They've just done it. And that is so impressive to me. And that's great. That fits their life, but everybody's different, and so I think it's really, different for every person. It's on an individual basis on how they work in these roles and the lifespan and all of that. But I do think that generally speaking, those types of roles can be really challenging and people do burn out because it's a lot of work.
So lifespan, I guess, seeing me coming from Europe, initially when I came to New York, I was a bit shocked that I only have 10 days paid off, and that's that was the standard in the first restaurant I worked at. I was like, this is wild,
Right.
And then, but I still, at least to some degree, the private sector is slightly better, but it's still nowhere close to European benefits, for example, when it comes to paid time off with family leaves or maternity leave. Would you think, from maybe your personal experience too, that if maybe the families would embrace a little bit more paid time off, then people would maybe last longer, and then that rate of burn on churn would be different.
That's a good point. And I do see various amounts of paid time off. I think, the standard in the US is like 10 days to 2 weeks. That's, typical. But I do see, like even today, this morning we were negotiating an agreement for someone and the client wanted to give 2 weeks off and the candidate asked if they could have 20 days and the client said, absolutely, sure. I mean, that's great if we can help somebody get a little more time off. And of course they know they're working around the client's schedule, right? They're good. Yeah. They may need them on certain days. They need to get their vacation approved, of course, like any job. But I've also seen unlimited PTO. I see it a lot more in tech, like if we work in tech jobs, or less of the private service. I think private service, I don't really see a lot of unlimited paid time off. I see more 2 weeks to, sometimes 3 weeks I've seen. Isn't it so funny how the US is so different from Europe when it comes to paid time off, parental leave, all of it is so opposite. And I will say that I think what we see from our employers and our clients that we work with, I think they're very fair, given what is standard in the US. I think they're very fair. If we always push back when we feel it's not fair, and we'll say to them, we typically see a little more time off. Is that negotiable? Because, at the end of the day, we want to make sure the client's taken care of. But like you said, we don't want the person in this job burning out. We want to make sure they have what they need and they get that time they deserve and can decompress and take a beat from the craziness. So I think I've seen all different kinds of paid time off amounts, and I've seen different parental leave amounts. Every company and family office, everyone operates differently, but I do think it's fair for the most part. I haven't really seen too many times where we've been surprised.
Yeah. So it sounds like basically there is no real standard and most things are up for negotiation.
Yes.
That's something that I actually appreciated in the beginning, where unlike the corporate world where things are very set and that's very comparable, like, okay, this person has this kind of salary and you're roughly in that bucket with them. But in the private world, I found that not so much based on your skill set, but more so on who you are as a person. The attitude you have in somebody's home can completely change the trajectory of your benefits as well as your bonuses or your overall salary. And like if you become a core member of the family for different reasons, it's kind of the positive impact you have on the environment, what you're doing for them, the kind of work you get done there. It can, like I've seen some families almost adopt people to a degree where it's like they literally became family, and they're long after, and this I've seen especially with nannies, long after they were needed and the kids are pretty much grown, they keep them around and give them like almost odd tasks just to keep the person around. And I find that quite incredible that in this industry, it's really who you are to someone else that can completely shift the trajectory of your career.
It absolutely is. And I always say attitude is everything. And that's why I think with these roles, especially in anything in private service, particularly, the soft skills and the personality and who you are as a human being Not that it's more important than your skill set and hard skills, because obviously that's going to help get you the job in the first place, that you know what you're doing. But it's just as important because it's who you are to that person that you're supporting. I hear so often the assistant, someone hiring an assistant and referring to them as their right hand, because they're literally doing so much for them, and not just taking orders, but acting as a partner, a thought partner, helping them, with so many things. And as they get to know their principals better and better through the years, like you said, sometimes they become like family. And I've seen that with nannies too, where nannies, maybe the kids are full grown, but the nanny turns into a family assistant, and then they turn into the personal assistant. And then I've seen nannies grow into estate managers and directors of residences just from working with one family and being just so valuable to them and what they need. And just their whole career is set because they will always have a place with that family. And that is so cool to see.
I think it can be incredibly positive, and I'm inspired when I see it. But I think it can also be a double-edged sword where you're incredibly reliant on that relationship.
That's an interesting point. I'll tell you. So whenever we interview candidates and we're trying to maybe headhunt and poach them for a job, and maybe they didn't come to us looking for a job, but we saw them and thought their experience was fantastic and reach out about a job we're working on. And maybe they take the conversation with us because we spark their interest, and that's great. But sometimes when we talk to them, it's an interesting point of view, what you just said, because we'll say, how long have you been with the family? Oh, you've been with them for 20 years. And tell us about that. Like, that's a very long time. Would you consider leaving? And, what would be your motivation for leaving? And through all of these interview questions that we're asking them, just getting to know them in an initial screen, I very, very, very few times have seen someone at least admit to us that they feel that way. I see people say, I absolutely love my family. I would only leave under, very certain circumstances, or, X, Y, and Z. I don't see it very often, or at least no one has told me that, but I could definitely see how that could happen. I think in any scenario where you're with somebody for a really long time.
Yeah. And I think it's probably nothing you actually want to share too much. It's like,
right.
because it's like a dependency, it's like,
yeah, people probably are not. Yeah, they're not telling us about that.
Yeah, you don't want to walk around town telling I feel kind of dependent on my relationship.
Exactly.
And that's actually another thing that at least some chefs, including myself, one of the things that I try to encourage chefs is to get financially independent from their paychecks. And I'm like, guys, first start saving a bit and then start investing a bit. Yeah. Because you don't want to be the person that relies on the paycheck. And I see people rushing into jobs because they need the money. And I'm like, you want to sit in an interview process as comfortably as you can, knowing that you have some money in the bank, that you can say no to the job if you know the family might not be the right fit. Because I think it's an important position to be in order to find the best work relationship.
Mm-hmm. I agree with that. And I think it's tough, right? Because if you are looking for a job and maybe you've been doing contract work, or you haven't been in a steady job for a while, you get that opportunity for a full-time job, even if it's not perfect, you might tell yourself it is because you need the job. And that happens all the time. It's hard to avoid, but I love that advice. if you can be independent of your paycheck, that is the best place to be. And if you can invest, and if you can, save money, that's the best place to be. But I understand. Not everyone gets that opportunity, or at least understands that they have that opportunity because maybe the way that they are saving money or not saving money. But I like that perspective. That's cool.
Yeah, I feel like at the core of it, we do have the level of salary where this is a possibility. Like when I was a line cook or a chef de partie in New York, that was not so much. I don't want to say it was impossible, but it was not that kind of reality. Like I was truly working hard in some of the best restaurants in the world to improve my skill set, but I was making no money. But I think as a private chef, there's room for that. And I think it's the smart move for ourselves and our family. And because then when we sit in interviews, and also when we ever come into a situation, maybe with the family, that makes us uncomfortable, then we don't rely on the next paycheck or 2 or 3. And then we can look at the situation with more clarity and be like, okay, maybe the way they treat me isn't right. I don't only need to stay here for financial reasons, you know? And I think that's a powerful position to have. And I think given the kind of salaries we have in the US as private service professionals, I hope that everybody at least considers moving into that direction.
Yeah. I think it's great that you encourage people to do that too, because it is, like I said, the best possible case scenario to be independent of your salary and be able to take a job because you genuinely want it and you're excited and you love the family and you love the, you know, what you'll be doing in the job versus feeling like you have to take it because you need it. So I think, you know, if you can get into that position, that's awesome.
Yeah. Well, Brittany, I think this was a really great conversation. One of my favorite questions is, what do you consider a life well lived?
Ooh, a life well lived. Well, my immediate thought of a life well lived is being able to serve, from a business perspective, serve the people around us in a positive, fulfilling way, like we do through Pocketbook. And from a personal perspective, be able to balance your work and love what you do and enjoy your family and spend time together and travel and eat good food and just experience all the good things in the world. And I think if going back to your comment on saving money, I think if you plan for it and you do what you can to save towards that, and you can really create an awesome life for yourself. And I do think, especially with these private service jobs, there's so much access to that because you're right. Oftentimes you're making a great salary in these roles and you have a lot of opportunity and you meet a lot of interesting and great people. And there's really endless opportunity. So I think a life well lived is being able to experience all that life has to offer and really genuinely enjoy it.
I love it. So where can people find you in Pocketbook? Where's the best place to connect with you?
Yeah, you can find us at pocketbookagency.com. We're also on LinkedIn. We're on Instagram. You can find me on LinkedIn, Brittany Dolin, and we look forward to connecting with you.
Well, Brittany, thanks again. This was a very lovely conversation. I really love the different takes and also exploring a little bit more what it means for you shifting, you know, being an assistant to family to building your own agency. Thank you so much for making the time.
Thank you, Hannes. I appreciate it.
We'd like to thank our sponsor, FultonFishMarket.com, the best seafood in the nation, trusted by the best chefs in the world. Aside from offering premium seafood, they also make life easier for you by delivering all these outstanding products right to your doorstep. Visit the official website, www.fultonfishmarket.com, and explore their incredible selection of seafood and let your clients experience quality that has captivated palates for generations. Use code PRIVATECHEF at checkout to get 15% of your first order. When it comes to seafood, FultonFishMarket.com is the name we trust. Thank you for joining us at the Private Chef podcast. If you know any highly skilled chefs that want to take their life to the next level, make sure to share this podcast with them. And if you enjoyed this episode, click subscribe and check out our upcoming episodes. Thank you for listening.